Welcome back to Jaeger's Code. So today I'm going to talk about ES6 or ECMAScript 2015, which is a significant update to JavaScript with many useful features. So you have arrow functions, constant keywords, the let keywords, symbols, destructuring, classes, variadic functions, many higher order functions, template literals, default value in function parameter, rest parameter, spread operator, for of loop, generators, promises, modules, import, export. So all of these things are very useful features that are covered in ES6. However, I cannot talk about all of them in these specific tutorials, but I'm going to talk about arrow functions, constant keywords, let keywords, symbols, destructuring, variadic functions, template literals, rest parameter, spread operator, for of loop, and classes, which is not in purple, it should be. Anyway, so before ES6, we had to use other libraries, such as _JS or low-js, but you have to be careful, because if you want to implement right now ES6 features, well, you have to know that they are not supported in most of the browsers, so you should use Babel. Babel compiles your ES6 code into ES5 code, which is supported in almost all browsers now. So, firstly, you have the var keyword, which is being augmented with two new keywords that better represent the type of data that you want to store, let and const. So it is in turn making them easier to debug and less prone to mistakes. So you should use them from now on, I'd say. So let and const, they are block scoped. So if you compare it to var, which is function scoped, this is much more handy when you want to have full control over the data they want to store. This means that they are local to the closest block, curly braces, that they are defined in, whereas var is local to the entire function, or even global sometimes if you define it outside the functions. So you have a block consistency. As you can see in the code with two examples, you can see Luke, which is a variable that is declared with let. And then you have the function which prints name as fill, the strings fill. And then when outside of the function, you're calling name, it returns Luke. So that means that it is simply within the block, right? How you define it outside the block will put another value in this variable. So you can change it. So what is the difference with const? Well, the let variables, it is used to hold variables that are subject to change. Unlike var, you cannot redeclare the variable though. So this helps prevent accidental overwriting of a variable once it's declared, which happens all too frequently with var. But there is nothing preventing you from doing this inside of a different block though, as we have seen in the previous example. So const, as the name implies, it is used for data that you will know that they will stay constant. So trying to reset value after it's been set would result in an error. Unlike let, const must be initialized with value at the time of the definition. So, let and const were quite straightforward. Now look at the new feature, which is the for of loop. The for of loop is a new loop in ES6 that replaces both for in and for each loops, and it supports the new iteration protocol. So you use it to loop over iterable objects, which are, for example, arrays, strings, maps, sets, etc., etc. You should check it out online. Iterable objects, if you want to know more about this. It's basically the for of loop does for the variable of an iteral, and then you have the function which does stuff. So you could look at this code compared to the previous code, which is much more verbose, and you're declaring a lot of things that take not a lot of your time, but it's those little things that just piles up. So if you look at how you would use the for loop, you have the const iterable with a, b, it's an array, so it is iterable. And then you have the for const x of iterable, and then you do your thing. When you have to compare it to how you would do before, you had the const array, and then you have for let I equals 0, and then I smaller than array.length, I++, and then you do something it's well too complicated. So you can see how this makes your code much easier to read, much easier to understand it for yourself. It takes much less time to do. So you should be careful though, because these objects I just mentioned, as I said already, they are iterable, which means that they have a Symbol.iterator property. So the Symbol.iterator property allows us to manually iterate of the collection by calling the Symbol.iterator next method to retrieve the next item in the collection. So look at the code. You have the array, you have const iterator equals array.symbol.iterator, and then when you console log the iterator.next.value, you get, as a result, A, B, C, D. So that means that it can be iterated using this property. So the for of loop syntax is essentially a wrapper around the Symbol.iterator to create loops. So you need to be careful indeed, because you need a helper function if you want to iterate over plain objects. For example, if a value is array-like, you can convert it into an array via the array.from. So for example, const array-like, then you have this object, length 2, 0a, 1b, and then you have to do const at x of array-like, which throws an error. So you should do for const x of array dot from array-like, and then console.log, because you're creating an array. So you can iterate with an existing variable. For example, let x for x of ab console log x with an array element, as you can see on the code, and with an object property. So don't hesitate to pause the video and look at these codes and try to see what's going on. It's really straightforward. If you can really understand what's going on, you can use it on a lot of different things. And as you can see, it's really intuitive. So you might say, what's the difference between for in and for of? Well, let's compare them. For in applies to enumerable properties, whereas for of, as the codes just suggested, applies to iterable collections. You can use for in with objects, whereas for of loop, you need to convert the object into an array or something that's iterable. So you can use for in with an array, but it's not advised. However, for of loop is really ideal for arrays. Same for strings. For in loops are really not advised for strings, but for of loops, yeah, it's really the ideal way you want to go for this. Now let's move on to template literals. Denoted with backticks instead of single quotes or double quotes, template literals can contain placeholders which are represented using the $sign and then the curly braces in which you have the expression. It's really handy when you want to go to a new line. So instead of writing plus and then slashes and etc. plus, you simply write in between the backticks as you want, because it will remember the space you have used. So this is extremely handy, and it permits you to save a lot of different small, seconds that take you in the end of the day, like sometimes minutes, sometimes hours of your day, just writing these little things. So look at the code. You have const students, name Alexandre Dupont, guardian Mr. Dupont, const teacher, etc., etc. So that's before. How you would do it is by having the message variable in which you have the student.name and then the plus. You use the concat basically. But after you don't use the concat, you just use the $sign with the expression inside. And as I said, if you wanted to use some space in your text, it would be much more straightforward to do it using the template literals. So moving on to destructuring. So remember, before, when you wanted to access the values of points, you would say something, const point equals 10, 25, minus 34 is an example. Then you have const x equals 0.0, const y equals 0.1, const z equals 0.2. And then you do console.log xyz and you have them. So it's kind of the same as destructuring, but actually it's really different. So destructuring borrows inspiration from languages like Perl and Python. It allows you to specify the elements you want to extract from an array or objects on the left side of an assignment, which is different. So you can achieve the same result as before, but with much less code, and it's really easy to understand. So look at the code now, right? How easy it is. You just have your const here declared, and you have const xyz equals points, and then they remember the place in which you have put your xyz, and it just logs it out. So you have literally destructured your array. So like at two other examples, the example with Gabriel, Jasper, Kate, Lily, Mike, and Smith, let first, second, third equals positions. The value of the second is Jasper. Then you have the example of destructuring an object. You can see const kind of gemstone as an object, type emerald, color green. And then you're asking, to console log the type and the color, and to return the value, you can just say const type color equals kind of gemstone in between the curly braces. So you have basically destructured your object. Look at the syntax. Don't hesitate to pause the video and become very, at ease with how you would write it yourself. So you could, recopy it and then destructure it yourself, try different things, console log to the console, and try to see what it returns. It's really helpful. Now moving on to the spread operator. So the spread operator is written with 3 consecutive dots, and it gives you the ability to expand or spread iterable objects into multiple elements. So look at the code. You have const books equals Amadeus, The Hobbit, Alice in Wonderland, Harry Potter. You log 3 dots books, and it gives you that, which is absolutely amazing. You don't have the weird braces. You don't have any commas. It just gives you that straight, as if it was in a sentence, kind of. So it's extremely handy. If we look at the second example, you have the same thing with numbers. So you can see how it is straightforward. Now look into the spread operator versus combining arrays with Concat. So if you wanted to concat 2 arrays, you would do this. Const fruits, apples, bananas, berries. Const vegetables, cucumber, potato, celery. Then you do const produce equals fruits.concat vegetables. And then console out the produce. And then it gives you apples, banana, berries, cucumber, potato, celery. Okay, there's a shorter, simpler way with the spread operator. You just say const produce equals 3.fruits, 3.vegetables. And it prints out exactly the same thing, which is what you need. How handy is that? So the rest parameter is also written with 3 consecutive dots. It allows you to represent an indefinite number of elements as an array. This can prove to be really helpful. So look at the code. You have const order, some numbers, some strings on it, milk, eggs, etc., 180. Then you destructure it. You have const total, subtotal, tax, 3 dots, items, equal order. And when you look at it, it prints exactly what you need. So the 3 dots items is what you should really look at. Because by using the rest parameter, items is assigned at the rest of the values in the array, as an array. See? So another case of how the rest parameter can be super useful is with the variadic functions. So the variadic functions are simply functions that can take an indefinite number of arguments. So for example, a function called sum, which calculates the sum of an indefinite amount of numbers, would look like that. So pause the video and look at it and try to understand how it is done. But I think that this is quite intuitive, right? You have function sum, 3 dots nums, let total equal 0, for a const num of nums, total plus equal num, return total. It's really, really, really intuitive. And notice the use of the for all loop. Now let's move on to the arrow functions. This is really important. ES6 introduces a new kind of function which is called the arrow function. It is very similar to regular functions in behavior, but it is quite different syntactically. So the regular function, look at that. You have const uppercase names, if you want to have all the names in uppercase. Ella, Manny, Daisy, .map, function name, return name to uppercase. And the arrow function, however, does just have ela_many_daisy.map name arrow name.toUpperCase. So it looks really, really intuitive, and it is. So it's just a matter of knowing how actually you get rid of all these things in order to use the arrow properly. So you remove the function keywords, you remove the parentheses, you remove the opening and the closing curly braces, the body, you remove the return keywords, the semicolon, you add an arrow between the parameter list and the function body. Ooh, so that sounds like a lot to do, but if you look visually at the code, you can see how it makes sense, right? And you can see how it actually is quite easy to do and quite easy to update. So arrow functions couple great with temple literals. Look at that. Const grid name, arrow, hello, dollar sign, curly braces name with the back thing. So you greet Daisy and it says hello Daisy. And the example 2, also you can see how handy it is. It's short and intuitive. That said, you need to be aware of quite a lot of things for the arrow functions in order to use them really extensively in your code. So I think that you should read intensively about the use of this in general, but also for arrow functions as well, because they don't really work the same way. With regular functions, the value of this is based on how the function is called. With arrow functions, however, the value of this is based on the function surrounding context. So in other words, the value of this inside an arrow function is the same as the value of this outside the function. So I have posted some links on the description with some of the best sources to understand it. To me, the best source to understand it, which is really, really extensive, is You Don't Know JS, This and Object Prototypes on GitHub. And for the default function parameters, you should check out NDN Web Docs on default parameters. You can't really go wrong with this. They are the officials, the most updated, and they explain it quite well. So classes preview now. Well, first of all, you have to be very, very aware that ES6 classes are just a mirage and they hide the fact that prototypal inheritance is actually still happening under the hood. So JavaScript is still prototype-based, but it is also a multi-paradigm language that supports procedural, object-oriented, and functional programming styles. So pause the video and try to understand this code. You have the constructor, which is the inside of the parentheses, the different things that we will use to construct this class. This.calories equals calories. Class ice creams extends desserts. The constructor always is there. You need to have a constructor when you form a new class. It doesn't matter if it extends a new one. Super, with calories in parentheses, means that it inherits from the class desserts. Super means that it inherits from the parent class. And you need to show that it inherits first before using this. Okay? And then add topping, which is like another function that you're using inside. So actually, it's not that new in the sense that what you achieve is not new at all. So before, how you would go about is just put a function, plain num engineers, etc., etc. Then you have methods which are inherited by all instances, and you're using the prototype way of doing things. Now you can see how you do it after using the ES6 feature. You use class, plain constructor, and then you do whatever you want with it. You just need the constructor, you need class, you need to declare the new exactly as before. So you have the same way of creating Daisy's plain, for example, or like an instance. But the way that you actually create the prototype is by using the class keyword. But that does not mean that that JavaScript is like Java in that sense. But you can see how it's actually using a kind of a function to do the same thing as a class. So this class is just using the prototypal inheritance under the hood. So I have just covered the tip of the iceberg really. I hope that you do see how your code can be cleaner, easier to understand, and more efficient and more concise using the newest ES6 features. However, really have in mind that in order to use ES6 features extensively in your code, you need to read a bit more about it. You can't go wrong with MDN web docs. The link in not in bio but in description. You should see Udemy online courses if you're willing to pay a bit for it. It's not really expensive. However, if you really don't want to pay for anything, MDN web docs are really good, and you should try to see some official sources on YouTube explaining it to you as well. So the links are in description. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you have enjoyed the video and that you've learned a bit more about ES6 and that you want to use it now. To stay updated, you can either follow me on Instagram, Jagerscode, or subscribe here. Stay updated because I will have a lot of different tutorials in the upcoming weeks. I'm going in a week and a half at the Oxford Hack, so I'd like to do a video on what I did there, how I found it, and why you should join a hackathon as much as you can. So I hope that you're having a great weekend and see you very soon.